Camera tracking for beginners in Blender 4.3. What makes a shot easy to track? What makes a shot hard to track? And what are some things you should avoid altogether? Now, before we get started, I think it's important to note there are some great products that will do this tracking for you, but they are paid services and most of them are subscriptions. There's a few free apps and paid apps that will do the tracking for you, but they only seem to work on Apple products. CamTrack AR and Omniscient will work on iPhones and some iPads. You'll have to look at the specifications. I made a video before you can check out here. Omniscient tutorial is coming soon, and once it's ready, I'll put that link in the description. When you're just starting out in Blender, tracking is very intimidating. Now, if you want to get the best results in the shortest amount of time, you have to understand your footage. I downloaded a couple videos off pexels.com, and this is what we will use to practice motion tracking. We're going to open up Blender, and yours is going to look a little different than this. This is just how my default scene is set up, but this is irrelevant for kind of what we're going to be doing. Now, it probably looks a little different at the top here. You might not have one that says motion tracking. So if you don't, you're going to hit this little plus, VFX, motion tracking. And this is probably what it's going to look like. I usually like this a little bit smaller for this. I actually get rid of this box on the left. And now I'm going to pull in that file. So there's some key things to remember when we're pulling in the file. When we look at the reference videos, we can actually hover over it and get some very useful information, as you can see here. You can see the aspect rate, resolution, the amount of frames, how long the clip is, and the frames per second. So it's very important that we take note of like this information, right? Because we're gonna have to replicate that within Blender. So we'll do this one first. We'll open it up, and now you can see it has actually pulled it in. Over here in our output properties, we can see that we have our frame rate as well as our resolution for the project. So you have to make sure these numbers match what that said before. So this was here. So there we go. Now that we have this, we can also set our output directory and what kind of file types you want. So for me specifically, I prefer OpenEXR multi-layer because I like to comp it all back together and everything. But honestly, when you're just starting out, the easiest way is to just do PNGs. They're transparent, they're easy to work with. You're not going to get all the color correction space to really do more complex corrections afterwards, but that's most of the time that's okay. So it might, if it does look a little different, it's because your color management settings are different. So I'm going to go down here, sRGB, AGX, medium, high contrast. So that's not what it actually looks like probably. It probably looks like that from when I downloaded it on the internet, which would be just a standard and on here. If I want to keep it looking like exactly what it looks like, I would keep it probably like that to start with the clip. So we brought the footage in, and now we actually need to track it. So we can prefetch, and we can set scene frames. So we should actually do that first. Set scene frames, then prefetch. You can see mine here. It's only filling up to there. It means my cache limit is full. If you do want to get it all in there, you can go to Edit, Preferences, System, Memory Cache Limit right here. Mine's at 8192. Yours is probably half of this. If you want to double it quickly, you can just hit ×2 and enter, and it'll actually do the math right in it. You can do that with any box in Blender. It's pretty cool. Back to the tracking. Okay, few things to note. You can detect features and have it do it automatically, which is pretty good at it. It actually works pretty good most of the time. See, the problem is little areas like this. It's finding this little point here, but within this box is this edge. And when two edges are meeting like this, and they're sliding, it might think where they're adjacent there, it's actually the point, so it's following it, but that's creating a distortion. Because of this distortion, it's throwing it off, so it's going to fail your camera solve most likely. So you don't want like things like that, like this one too. I would totally get rid of that one. And this one. and even that one. But so we want to kind of be aware of where it's placing them. Anytime it's on two things like that, it is going to create a problem for us on the edge of things. This one probably too. Actually, we'll leave it for now, and we'll just see what happens. And we started on the first frame. Usually I do this in the middle. So actually, let's just do that. We're going to get rid of all of them. A, X, delete. I'm actually going to set this to 180 frames. So down here on the bottom, I'm going to set this to 180. Now, length of clips is a huge thing when you're motion tracking. The more movement and the less contrast, the harder it is going to be to track. Now, especially if you have a blurred background, and if you have any kind of blurred subjects, let's say you have someone very close to the camera and you have the background is far away and it's very blurred, you're not really going to be able to track that very well. It's going to be very, very hard. Those kind of shots probably aren't going to go so well. So typically you'd want to add any kind of blur back in afterwards. Let's say you wanted, to have that depth and to show that depth, but you might need a rotoscope further down the pipeline or just have separate assets so that you can sandwich them back together. So for the sake of motion tracking, no blur, the least amount of jitter as you can get, and you want some parallax. You need some motion and some movement, right? It has to triangulate this position. I'm going to go to a halfway point, which would be frame 90. We're going to detect some features, and then we're just going to track it backwards. And then we're going to go back to 90, track it forward. All right. And then just for giggles, let's just see what the solve ends up being. We will select keyframe and focal length. Solve camera motion. 4.25. That's not very good. We want it to be under 1 for sure. The lower, the better. I can see that one's just a problem right away. I'm actually going to look at this chart here. And a lot of times you can just get rid of the outliers and it'll really clean it up. You can also look for jittery tracks, things that are not staying where they're supposed to. So it looks like they're sliding it all. Let's see. I found some that are going a little crazy. So you can see here. See how this one right here, jumping around. That's no good. That's going to throw off our camera solve. So the more issues we have like that, the less likely this solve is going to actually be accurate and result in a good track. So we need to really pay attention to that. We only need 8 points at once on screen, and because you can see so many of you. To the end, 180, it looks like, we maybe got like 15 or something right there. So it's not too much at the end. It looks like we get a little bit. We could track backwards from 180 and try to calculate with that. But let's just say we deleted those couple that we saw that were messing up, and let's just randomly solve the camera motion again. See what happens. 3.88. So it's a lot less. So we did better. Now I'm going to bet that I could just go for some of these here and probably end up with a good track, a decent one, a better one. Let's see. I just selected them and hit X and deleted them. 2.91. That's good progress. So this is all happening pretty quickly. And because it's a relatively easy scene to track, you can see we don't have any, there is moving objects, but it didn't pick those up and track them, which is great because we would have to get rid of those tracks. That would throw it off. You really can only track from, if you're trying to solve for camera motion, you want to track from objects that are staying still. If you're doing motion capture or something like that, that's a totally different story. But for camera solve, you need high contrast objects that aren't, sliding on other objects. So I found another one over here. It's doing some funky stuff. Sliding across the edge, yep. Oh. Yeah, there we go. it's a little weird. Now I'm just going to solve again. 2.9. Okay. I'm going to delete a few more of these ones that are moving a lot, since we do have quite a bit on the screen at one time. We should be able to pull a better resolve. 2.95, no. Still not that much better. 0.61. So I cleaned up some of those, pulled them out of there. I could probably even get it better if I deleted some of these. I am going to save this now. I haven't saved it yet. Typically in Blender, you want to do that as often as possible. Now that it's saved, I'm gonna delete this one here, this one, and this one, and just see if we get an even better solve. 0.48. I'll take it. All right, now we're gonna set up the actual 3D scene, since we have a well-tracked camera. We think we'll see. Looks good. It's a good camera solve. It thinks it's good. Now we gotta tell it where like the starting point is, where the ground is, and that kind of thing. I'm gonna select this point right here in the middle. I am going to call that. I'm gonna call this my origin. Call this my x-axis. Okay. And I will select these three and click floor. Then set as background. Set up tracking scene. Okay. So we can see it looks a little funky right now. So we set up the scene and everything, but it looks like they're floating up in space. So we're going to go into another view and we're going to actually start playing around with the location, because the tracking doesn't look bad. But if you looked at the lines, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, they're not sticking to anything. Well, that's because that's just like the 0 point ground level of the Blender scene, but it tracked way down below that. So it took that information as the camera's really high off the ground. So we need to adjust where our points are in space. So the easiest way we're going to do that, we're going to go into the modeling tab or layout, or really doesn't matter. Just a different workspace here. Modeling works pretty good. We'll go in modeling. With 0, we can see, oops, our thing looks like it's staying on the ground of the grid, but when we go back into the camera view, it's floating in outer space. So if I go to this little section up here, click on it, at the bottom it'll say motion tracking. Turn on that motion tracking data. Now I'm going to pay attention to what tracks are sticking to the ground of the scene. So look at boom, boom, boom. Those ones we set as the ground plane, those are our ground. So I know that's my ground one there. Let's select her, and that will hold shift. Select them both. Hit 1. I'm going to go ahead and assume that right here is the road, right? That's what you would assume. Right here, this nice flat section. I'm going to hit GX, drag this right over. GZ, drag it right down. Zoom in, let's check that out. GZ. Go in the camera view. Oh, she big. She big. We're going to scale this bad boy down. Scale by. It's kind of twisted too. You can see it's off kilter a little. I can rotate that and make it line up with this empty here. If I hit GRXX, it'll rotate just along the x-axis. Try to get it even. Now I should be able to GZ. Hit Command S, save it. All right, it's tracking pretty good. So whatever I wanted to do to this scene, now it would start happening. So because of the contrast and everything and the nice smooth movement, this one was really, really easy to track. All right, for another example, I'm in a new Blender project. I'm going to open up another motion tracking tab. So it looks like yours. I will close that out. And now pull in my video file. Now I can see the specs here when I hover over it. I'll open that clip. And now we are going to set scene frames, prefetch the data. Boom, it's all loaded in. Let's see, what do we got? We got like 400 something, 426. We'll call 200 the starting point. And now we're going to do this one manually. It's going to be a little different. We're not going to use automatic detect features. We are going to do it manually. So I'm going to hold control on my keyboard and I'm just going to click in some spots. So there's probably some good spots right here on this sign. Click that. I'll go there. Go here. There. See, I don't want to get both of those legs in it because I know it's going to kind of like probably change, get a little distorted. So I just went for one there. I'm going to actually go for this leg too and that leg just to grab the edge of it. That'll probably work pretty good. This isn't that high contrast. Actually, it's going to work pretty good though. And when I play it, you can see it's kind of like warbly. Like they probably stabilized it or something. I don't know, but you can see the pixels are almost like dancing. It's kind of weird. So, probably not going to get a perfect track from this. But anyway, we need 8 points consistently throughout the whole thing. Not throughout the whole thing. We need 8 points to move from frame to frame. So there has to be consistent points tying everything together. So we are going to go for a bit more than 8 here. Let's see if we can find another one on the ground here. Let's do that. All right, I'm going to hit A. So those are all the tracks. How many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Plenty. So if I move from 200, I remember I placed these at frame 200. If I move here, they're no longer in the right place because they haven't been tracked. So the frame you place them on needs to be the frame you track from. Otherwise, you will risk losing it before you even track it. So go to 200. I'm going to track backwards. That went quick. I'm going to track forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so there's 8 on the screen. Good. I was just trying to make sure it maintained at least 8. If it did not, it's going to. And if it goes under at any point, it's going to fail. But it looks pretty good. Let's just see if we can get a decent solve from this. Or refine focal length, solve camera. 0.55 right off the rip. Perfect. I'm going to save this file. And that's pretty awesome. I'll call this my origin. I'll do, I guess these 3 can be my floor. Why not? We'll do, set that. Apply scale. Set background, set up tracking scene. Move over to modeling. Save it. Check this out. All right, I need to make this a lot smaller. So I could turn on X-ray too and look through it, but I really want to see like the edges. I like to look at the edges and see how much they dance and wiggle. And we're also going to go to here and turn on the motion tracking visibility because we definitely want to see that. So our scale actually looks pretty good too, but let's shrink this down. I'm going to hit GSX. No, GSY. Yep. Okay, so you can see our lines are running off to the side. And we'll be a lot better off if we adjust the perspective to some of these main lines that we can see here. So a good way to do that is tie everything to an empty. So I'm going to add an empty into the scene and just kind of put it above everything. And I'm going to use it as like kind of a control mechanism. So I can rotate and scale and just move everything so the coordinates of the world change and we can align them with the actual geometry that we're seeing from our camera view. It just makes it easier when you drag and drop things in. They just square up easier. It just makes more sense. So Shift A, empty, sphere. I'm going to GZ, bring it up. I'm going to actually hit A to get everything. Oops. A, we're going to select everything here. So that you can see these aren't selected, but that's fine. Those are just part of constraints with the camera. They're just reference points. So as I move that camera and scale that camera, those reference points move also. So we're going to control Command P on my Mac here, Object Key Transform. She's not on the ground. So when I was looking at it, it looked like it moved a little weird. But and you can see these ones here. These are the lowest markers. I know I marked the ground. She is underneath those markers, which means she is underneath the surface of the ground, which is going to create an unusual movement from the camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab that control mechanism here. We're going to go back into the camera view. I'm going to hit G, R, Z. G, Y. See, that's almost lined up with that. GRZ again. No, I just need a kind of a ballpark with it. Okay, that's fine. And now with this nice lady here in her floor, GRZ. We'll line that up with some of this geometry. GY, left to right. Now you see it's a little slanted, which it actually looks like this ground probably is slightly slanted, maybe not, but we used this reference point and these two, which calculated as being slanted, so probably is somewhat accurate. Let's get her to the right height. So if I hit 1, I go into that side view, and I'm just going to hit G, Z, lift it up. And let's see, if all of this is the ground, you can see it kind of fluctuates where these tracking markers are, which kind of makes sense. It's like a cobblestone walkway. We're hitting 1, 2, 3 of them, almost hitting them, and we're kind of above these two. So we'll just get it a little bit closer. GZ, boom, back in the camera, and we're definitely going to have to scale her down. She's to scale. So because she's so giant, she's actually on the ground. I know my scale is off. She shouldn't be massive, obviously. I'm not doing anything with physics or anything. For this example, we'll just shrink it down like this. That's a chair right there. She still might even look a little bit big. Let's bring her over there. G, Y, GX. She looks like she'd have trouble. I think this is about the size that she's normally set to. That seems about right. Okay. So that tracking is kind of rock solid. Looks really good, actually. GY. Let's check it out. Actually, we're at like bad opacity here. Let's bring this up. There we go. Oops, just hit 0 again to get back in my camera view. I'm gonna save this for safekeeping. Ooh, that looks good. GS, scale this sucker down. G rotate Z90. Well, that looks weird. GSX. The hotkeys are definitely, the quickest way to get anything done in Blender. Let's see. Let's just hide this bad boy. Let's look at her feet. Like, you see the dancing of these pics. I don't know if that's heat. That could be heat distortion at time of filling, or my guess is some sort of stabilization. But, she does pretty good. The thing that makes it look the most fake is obviously her textures aren't real. It's like a cartoon being pasted on something. I just typically use this so I don't get lost in details of like lighting or anything like that at this stage. At this stage, that is not what I am here for. Just trying to track it, which that's a really good track. Even if it, especially if it was something like flying, you need even less of a track, and sometimes you don't need a track at all. If something is flying, you can get away with so much more. It's when something's making contact with another object, it has to be glued to that surface. Any slight motion or sliding, the illusion is blown instantly. So we have these trackers on this wall here. So let's say, I want to kind of recreate this shadow, because when I do light this scene, like I can just look at this and I can see, all right, there's geometry on the right hand side. It's casting a shadow on my subject. And then it kind of changes and it goes back. I don't need to recreate that whole shadow. I just need to make sure that like she gets hit with that whole shadow, so that like anything that I would put there would kind of act as it would in the real world. But we're going to recreate a little bit of geometry just based off these empties here. So I'll just select these here. We'll go back into the motion tracking and we'll just go into geometry here and 3D markers to mesh. Now, remember before we had parented everything to that empty. If we do want this object we just made to be parented to that empty, we'll have to do that as well afterwards. But you can see here, like, where's our object? Well, it just created points, single points. So I'll tab into edit mode, I'll hit A, and I'll hit F. And now you can see it. Just use those points as a reference to like create a mesh. I just filled it in, really. So topology is not good or anything like that. But honestly, I could use this to do exactly what I need to do, right? So you can see it's kind of a little off, but that would honestly be fine. It would get the job done. I just need to bring it up so I could get that shadow. So hit 0 back into this mode. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit 1 on my keyboard. Honestly, this vertice I would just bring up. Unless I'm attaching something here that I want to see. Like if it's like wavy or something, it's not going to matter. Really, it's only going to matter if it's like solid or not and light is bouncing off of it. So I would use an HDRI for this scene most likely, and I would just try to match like kind of the sky color, the brightness, and then I would rotate it around until it was bouncing on the back of this wall. And I would just G, Z, you could just literally bring this up, bring this one down, bring these ones way into the back. So I'll go back in my camera view, G, X, drag, yes, there we go. So you can see how easy it is here to start getting some basic geometry fleshed out, just with that tracking data. So I could literally pull that tiny little piece and turn it into all this, rather quickly, create the shadow I need. And obviously I would need to make a shadow cut trigger too, but that's not really what this is about. This is about motion tracking. And this is a way you can use some of this motion tracking data to recreate some of the structures as well. All right, third and final example. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this lady, this is how my scene starts. Yours isn't going to look like this. Irrelevant. Yeah, I didn't mention that before. She is just scale. It just helps me. It helps me when I start a scene. It just makes it easier to judge how big everything should be. Or if I'm motion tracking, it helps me identify the scale that things are set to. So for this example, we're going to open up the motion tracking tab, VFX, motion tracking. I'm going to close out that left box. I don't need you. Oh, it didn't work. There we go. Drag her down, open her up. All right, for this shot, we have a rotating shot. This one's a little bit different, but it's pretty cool. Oh, you know what? I did not read the specs, so let's check that out. What do we got? We got 24 FPS, 2048 by 1080, 2048 by 1080, 2048. Oops, cancel. 2048. Or 1080. That's how it is. All right, 24 it says. Boom. Save the file. T3. Okie doke. So if you want to see how big she is for reference, let's bring in a cube. I'm gonna hit GZ Control Up. That's gonna lock it to the grid. You can see Z wireframe. You can see she's not even as tall as one block, right? So it's good. It's how she should be. Z, solid, like get rid of that square. Now I save this in my startup file. That way she's always in here instead of the default cube, which just works for me. I think I said that before. Okay, let's drag this bad boy up. All right, you can see all that contrast it has. I mean, honestly, that would probably even help it track more. Let's just leave it like that this time. I'm not going to change the color space. There's a lot to grab onto here, though. But remember, like we talked about before, if I do these edges where the water is, that is going to be a no. I mean, it might work, but probably not a good situation. And waves move, and they're going to change the pixels, and the information is not going to be good. This stuff way in the back is not going to parallax much. So because it's so far away, it's going to look more like a plane. So I can probably pick quite a bit of things from over there if I need to. I mean, that's so far away. Unless I'm trying to build in that environment, I probably don't need to tie anything to that area. But we'll track it just to show how I would do it. Let's set the scene frames, prefetch, save again. And now I'm going to just scrub through it. I like to zoom out on this timeline. I'd like to see the whole thing so I can just do it really quickly. So that's some smooth motion. I'm sure. Yeah, it's real smooth. Great. This is another kind of ideal one. You know, if you notice, I kind of stay away from chaotic shots. If you need to add stuff afterwards, you just add it afterwards. Chaotic shots, a lot of times, chaotic shots are really short. And if you have a shot that's 1 second long and you need to put something in it, you don't even need to motion track it. A lot of times it's 24 frames. You can just eyeball it and literally like keyframe it and move. So like a lot of times you're when you have a lot of movement too, you're not moving forward or backward. It's more or less like panning, like chaotic panning. And if that's what it is, if you can get enough information to track like in a 2D space, do that. If it's blurry, fake it. Doesn't matter. Just fake it. Like, you know, chaos is hard to track. Anything with blur is hard to track. You can see this is all nice and sharp. I'm just going to start dropping some trackers in there. I'm going to put a bunch up here. None of this is going to really change. So these are probably good opportunities, right? Good opportunities to get like even some like flat kind of area. All right. And I can probably recreate a lot of that now just because of what I've got here. So I could like recreate a ground there and put a structure there. And go for a little more. And that might not be a good one, but you know what? We'll keep it. Let's pull some of this stuff from a little deeper, right? We're using depth and movement to triangulate. So the more depth you have, the better it is. If you have a 2D surface like this, for instance, and you're trying to track it, you really got to go for two-dimensional kind of tracking. You can just really track one spot and reference to it. If there is camera moving closer and further away, you can get depth from it. But if not, if it's a side-to-side thing, you know, you're just looking at some 2D tracking at that point. So let's just grab all these. And 292 is where they're placed at. I should have paid more attention to that. But whatever. We'll just go back to 292. There we go. I mean, it looks like just about everything stayed in the frame the entire time. How much was at the end there? It looks like a lot fell off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're not there. Remember, we needed 8 to kind of complete. So right here, we're dropping a few. And these guys are going to continue the hard work. 524. Remember that number because we're going to track them backwards too. Now let's hit a solve, keyframe, focal length, camera solve. 42.06. There's a troublemaker in the bunch. I think I might be able to tell who it is right away. He's up there. What the heck is going on? I don't know what is going on with that, but let's just pretend like we don't see that. This probably look crazy. What the heck? All right. Let's watch what that one does there. You know, if I hit L, I can lock onto it. Doesn't look like it does anything crazy. All right, let's just pull a bunch more spots by the road here. 493, track backwards. Back to 493, track forward. Solve camera motion. 0.95. That was easy. We got to solve. Save. All right, so that took a couple minutes. We got a good camera solved. We got some trackers down here if we needed to associate anything with this area. We got some trackers over here. If we needed to put anything over there, we could add a marker there. We could easily add some trackers over here and add objects to that back area too. Obviously, with the depths, you can tell high contrast, low contrast, atmospheric fog. There's a lot of composition work, compositing work that goes into that. But, you know, that's a whole nother series of videos. Now the real work begins, right? But let's just finish this one up. So we'll call this the origin point. We'll set origin. We'll say this guy, this guy, and this guy. They'll do the floor. We'll call this x-axis. And set as background, set up tracking scene. Modeling and layout. Let's check this out. Ooh, that's a nice statue. Let's just hide that. Let's check her out. See how she's doing over there. Oops. 0 back in the camera view. If you hold shift and middle mouse click in, you can just kind of slide around. Zoom in, space bar. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit wonky. Over real zoom, you can see it's moving a little bit there, but it's pretty good. I mean, that is pretty good. That looks pretty good. I just totally eyeballed that. It looks like it's staying like proper. Never mind. I mean, it's close. Overall, it's another good track. So that's my process for motion tracking in Blender. If you have any questions about what I went over, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you.